Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knit School Festive Sock Along 2020. It is the very first of its kind because Knit School is only 6 months old tomorrow. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I'm a little bit early, but do let me wish you a Merry Christmas. Even though it is only the 30th of November, but if you're going to be making socks, now is the time to start. So thank you all for joining me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can expect when we're doing the live teaching. I'm going to talk about what we're going to cover tonight and then a little bit about the rest of the week. If you're joining me live, do say hello in the comments. Hi, Margaret. Thank you for joining. And I will say hi back. When I'm teaching, I won't read the questions at the same time though, because what happens is I get a bit distracted and I forget where I am. But I will come back to all of the questions then at the end. But once I switch over to the teaching camera, I'm a little bit less reliable with the questions until the end. But do ask them so that you kind of get them out of your head. So what can you expect when we're teaching live? So what we're going to do is I have a camera and I do a close-up from above so that you can see everything step by step. I'm going to show you where we're covering the pattern. So the pattern, if you signed up via the mailing list, you will have a copy in your email. Or if you go to the file section of the Facebook group where we are at the moment, you're going to be able to find both the Simply the Simplest Christmas sock and also the upgraded version as well. Well, the modified leg, which is not a very glamorous name, but it is the cute name of it. So, hi Debbie, hi Amy and Annie. Oh yay, I'm so glad to see that people are joining. I'm very excited. I hope you guys have mince pies and mulled wine, but I must admit I do not have any mulled wine because that leads to some very odd and wonky cast-ons. So tonight we're going to start pretty basically. We're going to start with a slip knot. We're going to start with a slip knot. The cast on that I've chosen to use for this pattern. I'm going to talk about why I've chosen it as well, because obviously we're making a decorative sock, but I'm going to relate it back to how you would knit main socks as well, because I know that for some people this is a great chance to try socks without having to have them fit, but obviously you may want to move on to main socks as well. We're then going to talk about the cuff. And then we're going to do joining in the round as well, because I know that for some people this is going to be the first time they join in the round. Hi Tracy, hi Becky. Oh yay, I'm so excited. And then we are going to talk about joining in a new colour. So tonight we're going to keep it pretty basic. Then tomorrow night we're going to cover the Latvian braid, which is very exciting, and a little bit of basic colour work. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to show you kind of just the basics of colour work. Because it's quite a big subject, but we'll look at it really easily so that you just very basic, very easy to do. Then we're going to do on Wednesday, we're going to talk about turning the heel. We're doing some wrap and turn short row heels. Sounds a little bit intimidating, definitely isn't. So that is Wednesday. Thursday and Friday then we're going to kind of cover the rest. So it'll be the foot, the toe, and grafting the toe. So I'm so excited to be doing this. I just adore teaching socks. Sock knitting is like I think it's my reason. Actually, as I was sitting here before we started, I was sitting here knitting a sock, waiting. So if I'm waiting anywhere, if I'm doing anything, I am always knitting a sock. I think they're just the best project. So I'm going to switch over to the other camera now. I'm just going to say hello to a few more people. Hi, Julie. Oh, yay. Hi, Fiona. I'm so glad you all could make it tonight because I know it's a Monday. Which is not the best time, but hopefully 8 o'clock it kind of works for everybody. So let me swap over. I'm just going to switch cameras and then we're going to have a look at the pattern and then we're going to start doing some of the basics tonight. I think about 20 to 30 minutes maximum, because I don't want to, just, take up too much of your evenings, because obviously there's only limited knitting time between now and Christmas. And I think that, you will do the techniques, then you can knit some, and then we'll come back and do some more tomorrow. So I'm going to swap over and we will see where we go from there. Hi everybody again. Right, I have now moved. Oh yay, I'm so excited, Heidi. This is a great way to start actually with the sock, because it's like you don't have to make it fit. And I think that's where people struggle when they start with socks. So what I'll show you now is this is the pattern. So if you have a kit, you will have a printed one, and if not, you'll be able to print one out. Front of my patterns are always a little bit of chat. So we'll move straight into the pattern itself. So I don't know how familiar people are with patterns, so I'm just going to talk a small bit about this as a kind of an intro so that everybody kind of starts on the same level. Hi, Linda. Oh, from Florida. Oh my goodness. I hope I imagine you're better. Your weather is better than ours is. So, the finished measurements of this sock is that it is 14 inches kind of from the top. Actually, let me show you. This is the sock. So when the sock talks about, we'll tuck that in because I'm actually going to show you how to weave those in at the end as well. So I've kept my tails. So when we talk about the circumference of the leg, it's the whole way around the sock. So that is 14 inches. Then from here to here, it's going to be 15.5 inches. Oh, from here to here, just be better. And then it's 16 inches from here to here. But it's kind of a variable thing. So yes, these are that's the sock that we're going to be making. And you see, this is where your finished measurements are. One thing to watch for when you are making this and it's a real sock, you'll probably see two measurements. You'll see a foot and a finished size. So something to watch for, that you measure your foot, but it'll be something to watch for that's slightly different when you're making a main sock. Then the yarn is the retreat. So it's it's a roving yarn, so it's actually quite soft. Yes, so it's a super soft yarn, kind of for decorative things. I wouldn't make too many hard wearing things out of it, but I love it for decorations. The gauge, so for those of you who don't know what gauge is, and actually I'm going to slow down a little bit because you can probably tell I'm Irish. Well, this is my slow voice. So when we talk about gauge, we're actually talking about the number of stitches in a certain amount of space. So in this one, it is 17 stitches in 14 inches, which means that if you have 4 inches here, it'll be 17 stitches across. And then it's 22 rows in 4 inches. And what that means is that if your gauge is the same as mine when you knit this pattern, it means that you will get the same size sock. If your gauge is different, you might get a smaller sock or bigger sock, and you may need a different amount of yarn. In the kit though, you should have plenty of yarn in what's there at the moment. So that is just to tell you a little bit about gauge and why it's kind of important that they kind of match. With decorative things, it's less important. For socks, for feet socks, we call them, it's a little bit more important. Let me just check in case anyone has any questions before I move on to talking about a few more bits. Oh yes, Becky, they absolutely will. They'll be up here in the Facebook group until the end of the month. Oh, noon in California. Oh, yay. Very good. Yes, I hoped I was right. Alexa told me it was noon in California when I was guessing the time yesterday. Hi, Chris from Bolton. Yes, it is raining and wet here in Nottingham as well. Oh, thanks. I know I love Ireland as well. And actually, this is the longest I've been away. I'm very excited. I think I'll be there for Christmas, but fingers crossed. So there, my dears, if anyone has any questions about gauge, that is kind of what it means. Then the construction notes and the needles and the notions, we're going to be doing it on a long circular needle, although I am demonstrating on different yarn because I needed to have less stitches so that it will be quicker. And then some of the abbreviations, have a read through those. The wrap and turn is probably the one that you might not have seen before. We will cover that in big detail on Wednesday. Don't worry about it. Looks way more complicated than it is. I have to say the hardest thing about this challenge for me was writing the description of wrap and turns because it's such a funny thing. So tonight we are going to put away my sock, and the bit of the pattern that we are going to be covering is we are going to be talking about how you cast on, so a cable cast on, and we're going to talk about joining in the round and then not twisting, which is a really important thing, how you place your marker. We'll talk about that if you're using a double pointed needle as well, and then we're going to talk about garter stitch in the round because that's a slightly funny thing. And stocking stitch in the round, which you might have seen before. And then we're just going to talk about how I would change to the main colour. And that's what we're going to cover tonight. Hopefully that is what people are expecting. If anyone has any more questions, let me know. And I'll talk about any differences here between these and if you were making a sock that you were going to wear. So let me find myself some yarn that I had earlier. So I have this yarn I'm going to cast on in the actual pattern yarn. And I'm going to cast on, this is not the needle I would use for the project, but I'm going to use it because it's easier to demonstrate the technique with. So, for those of you who haven't done any knitting at all, I'm just going to very slowly demonstrate a slipknot. So, first things first, take out enough yarn. Now, the cast on we're doing means that I can do my slipknot really into my tail. So I call this my tail. And this is my working yarn that comes out of my ball. So just so that we know we're talking about the same things. With the cast on we're doing a cable cast on, so we can start quite close to the tail. You want to give yourself maybe 6 inches to kind of give yourself enough space to sew in your end later on. So to make a slip knot, just get your needle ready, but you don't need it because you can do this without a needle. So you take your yarn, put your tail over the front of your hand, bring your yarn, your working yarn, over the back, bring it underneath your index finger, over the top of your index finger, so you create a little cross. You then lift the bit that's on your finger, reach in and grab the loop of yarn. And that is how you create a slip knot, which I believe is called a slip knot because you can just pull it and it slips out. That might not be correct. I'm not up on why my knots have their names. So we'll do it again. You place your tail yarn over the front of your head. You bring it and you bring your working yarn over your index finger, down underneath, over again. You lift the loop that's around your finger, reach in and pull out your working yarn. And there is your slip knot. Now I know for some people that's going to be super basic, but I said we would cover all of the details. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to pop your slip knot onto your needle and you're going to tighten it up. And that is how you get ready to knit. So I'm going to work this, I'm knitting British style because I'm a British style knitter. Continental style is something that I don't teach generally, but the movement is very similar. So for this, we're going to do a cable cast on. Cable cast on is considered a knit cast on. So I'm holding this is my dominant hand, so I work predominantly with my right hand. I carry my yarn in my right hand. If you're a continental knitter, you'll be holding it in your left hand, but I'm going to cover this. It's British Irish style is what we kind of call it. We call it throwing as well. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to tension my yarn in my right hand. I do this through these fingers, but you may find that you do them through other fingers. It depends on how often you've been knitting. I find this works really well for me because it gives me just enough to kind of move the yarn in and out of my fingers. So to do a cable cast on, and you count your slip knot as your first stitch, you insert your needle into the middle of the stitch. So you'll see that the stitch has a back leg and a front leg, a front leg and a back leg, and you slip your needle for the first stitch only in from beneath into the front, so from front to back. You take your yarn and you take it around your needle to make a knit stitch, so very like a knit stitch, and then you bring it out, and as you come out you catch your yarn with the tip of your needle. You then take this stitch and you change direction ever so slightly and you slide it on to your needle. So that is how you create your very first stitch of a cable cast on using your slip knot and making one stitch. Now what you do next is different. I normally give myself a little bit of room, so don't pull this stitch too tightly, so you can give yourself a little bit of space so that you can fit your needle in. And what you're going to do now is you're going to take this needle, you're going to put it in between this stitch and the slip knot, all the way in between the two bars or above and below. You're then going to take your yarn, you're going to bring it around, and then you're going to bring your needle back. We'll do this loads of times, by the way, so don't worry. And then you're going to grasp your yarn and bring it through. You're then going to bring your yarn around like we did last time. You're going to change directions. You're going to take the needle and put it onto the other needle. And that is this is your third stitch, but it's been made in a different way to the first one. So we'll do that again because you're going to keep doing that the whole way along your cable cast on now. So you're going to take the tip of your needle, you're going to go in between the two, so you have both bars of your stitch and your other stitch is here behind. You then take your yarn, you go around, you bring your needle back and you grasp the yarn as you come through, tilt your needle around and then pop the stitch onto your needle. Don't pull it too tight because you won't have enough room to go back in. Now I'm just going to pause there and ask if anyone has any questions about that so far. So I know that this is really basic, but it is important to know how to do different types of cast on. And this is a common kind of knit cast on. The reason I chose this cast on for this project as well is that it is fairly stable. So let me just show you. It's got a little bit of pull in it. So when I'm using something decorative that you want to hang off of something, you don't want it to be too loose, which is why in this case is why this is the cast on chosen for this. If you were doing a sock, you might use a looser cast on because you want to get it over your heel and up along your leg. But that's why that cast on has been used for this kind of project. So I'm just going to do another 2 stitches of this and then we're going to go on and do the next piece. So again, give yourself a little bit of room. You can have a little bit of a poke around. You go in, wrap your yarn, go around your needle, bring it back, tilt your needles, and slip it onto your other needle. Do that one more time, and then we're going to switch, and I'm going to show you how to join in the round after you've done them. So again, my 2 bars, put my needle in, wrap my yarn, bring it back, grasp it with my needle tip, bring it out, and pop it onto my needle. And that's how you do a cable cast on, which is the cast on that we've used for this project. If you were doing a regular sock, you might see somebody doing something called a long tail cast on, and that's just another type of cast on that you can do, and it's a little bit stretchier. So it depends on the kind of how much stretch you want in the cast on. But because this is decorative, because this is a decorative one and I want a little bit more sturdiness in it, this is why this is the cast on we're using. We have a so this yarn is a roving yarn. So this is a soft yarn. So it's quite common that it looks like it's going to unravel a little bit because it's very loosely spun, and it makes it lovely fat and soft. It's not great, it doesn't wear hugely well for, say, jumpers, etc., but it's a beautiful yarn for making decorative bits and pieces or blankets that you're not going to use too much heavily. So yeah, Fiona, the roving is quite a lightweight yarn. We're actually going to move to a higher twist yarn now so that we can see the difference between those 2 yarns. So that's how you cast on for this project. I'm going to move off and put that away over there. So the next thing I want to show you is how to join in the round. So once you've cast on all of your stitches, and in the case of the project that we're going to be doing 60 stitches. I'm not entirely sure how many I've cast on here. The first thing you want to do then, so now I've cast on all of my stitches using my cast on method. I then want to make sure that my yarn is not twisted. So what you'll see here is that this at the moment is twisted around. It would be fine if I was working back and forth, so knitting a row and knitting another row, but I'm going to be knitting in the round. So I have to uncurl my edges to make sure that it's not twisted. So you can see me untwisting it here. And the reason you want to do that is if you don't, you'll have Mobius, which means that after about 4 or 5 rows, you will be very unhappy with it. So that's what you want to do. So sometimes I'll just lie them out on a flat surface, make sure that my tails and everything are kind of tucked in, and I can see that I have a uniform look of all those stitches. So that is how I do that. The next thing then is when you're joining in the round, one thing I recommend is that you always make sure that you start with your working yarn outside the ball, so that when you join, your yarn is coming up from this way, not through the center of the work. So for example, if I have it here and I join this way, I am going to be continually pulling the yarn through the ball the entire time, or through the center of the work, and that's very frustrating. So do make sure before you join that your yarn is in a position that's going to be comfortable to work from, that your stitches are all ready to go, and then you have in your left hand, this is slightly different as well. If I was working flat and I was going to work backwards, I would be holding this yarn, so the working yarn, in my right hand, but it would be coming from the left. When you join in the round, you're always carrying your working yarn in your right hand, or well, British style. So now I've made sure that everything is untwisted, and I want to join to work in the round. Now there's lots of people say that there's a bit of debate about this, and that it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So stitch marker as well. There are a couple of different ways of doing it. You can just start knitting, so I can place my marker and just start knitting. What you do when you get that, making sure that everything is in the right place, is that people worry. So you want to pull nice and tight, and then you want to knit another stitch and draw it in using your tail. And that helps close the gap, any gap between those stitches that you get sometimes when you're joining in the round. However, some people like the security of something else, and I include myself in this. So say for example, just rip that out, tidy that up as well. So if I wanted to join in the round and I wanted to cast on my 60 stitches, I would cast on an extra stitch, and to make sure that my join is really tight, I slide the last stitch I cast on to the first stitch beside the first stitch, so like this, so that they're together beside one another. Now you have to make sure you cast on an extra stitch because of what happens next. I then take my marker. We'll talk about why a marker in a moment, just in case people haven't seen them before. And then I knit the two of these stitches together. And the reason I do that is because I like the way it gives it a nice secure feeling. So it draws them nice and close together. So that is the two ways that you can join in the round. So you can just start off and join in the round, or you can just use an extra stitch, cast it on, and then pull them really close together. So that is another way of joining in the round. Now, if you haven't seen a marker before for working in the round, if you haven't been mostly knitting flat, the reason you use a marker when you join in the round is because as you come around here, there's nothing going to tell you, and it's very easy to just keep knitting around and around and around and around. And I think that's one of the great things about knitting socks, is that it is literally going around and around. But if you lose track of your rows, it is handy to have a stitch marker to tell you where you are, particularly later on. So it's less important now, because if I did my cuff and I started my leg a little bit for, on one side or other of the round, it wouldn't really matter. But later on, when I need to know where my start of round is, they're very important. So do have a nice, plus to be honest, I'm happy to have a little bit of knitting jewellery as well. So I've now joined in the round and I am ready to work. So if you aren't familiar, I'm going to just do a little tiny bit of this, and then I'm going to show you the next part of the example. So we talk about doing stocking stitch and garter stitch, and I want to explain the difference between those in the round and when you're working back and forth. So this is what we would consider to be garter stitch. But if I was doing garter stitch on flat straight needles, so knitting back and forth, I would knit all my stitches in every row. However, because of the way when you're knitting in the round, the backs of my stitches are the bumps. So if I keep knitting and keep going round and round, all the bumps will always appear at the back. So it looks like stocking stitch. So I have to do purl rows. So it's a knit row and a purl row for garter stitch, a knit round and a purl round for garter stitch when I'm working in the round, as opposed to all knit rows. And then garter stitch, stocking stitch, which is this flat looking fabric, that's all knit rounds. Whereas if I was knitting it on the flat, I would be knitting a row and purling a row. So that's just to point out the difference between that, because you'll see continuing stocking stitch in the pattern, and you'll also see work garter stitch as well. So for this piece, we're going to knit around, purl around, knit around, purl around, and for this we're going to knit around. When I say knit around, I mean knit all the stitches all the way around. So around refers to this from the first stitch of your round all the way around to the last stitch in your marker. So that is a really basic introduction to how we would do. So if I was knitting my sock now, I would continue on. I'm not going to take you through all of these stitches though. It'll be a little bit, we'll be here a little while. I'm going to show you what I prepared earlier. But just to point out as well is that when you are going to come around, so say I've come to this point, don't forget to bring your yarn forward through your needles when you're going to change to doing the purl stitches. And I mentioned that because if I was doing a purl row, it would be much more obvious that my yarn should be at the front, because I would have swapped hands. But when you're working the round, do remember you bring the yarn through the front before you start purling. So that is, we've now cast on, joined for working in the round. We've talked about the garter stitch, and the next thing I'm going to just show you is how to change colour for anybody who hasn't done it before. So you'd have knit all of these pieces, and you'd have done 24 rounds of garter stitch, and then you will be ready to change colours. So in this case, here's one I made earlier. And I am I've done a few rounds of garter stitch for this. And I've moved on one stitch so I didn't lose my marker. And that's one thing, if you are knitting in the round as well, do knit on one stitch, or don't do your last stitch of your round to make sure your marker doesn't fly off and your work is lurking around your house. So I'm going to take that stitch back out. So I'm about to start a knit round. And because you'll have worked 24 rounds, you will also be starting on a knit round. If you starting on a garter stitch round means you'll have a funny look on it, so do make sure that your knit round is where you're changing colours. So to change colours, there's two ways of doing it. There's lots of ways actually in knitting. So some people splice their yarns together by spitting on them, or you can do all sorts of joins. I do quite a plain join. So I take my needle, I insert it into knit it. I just pick up my yarn, and with the tail, hold your tail against the yarn, and then come up as if you were knitting the stitch normally. Come out, and your stitch is knit. And then you would knit on. Now you're going to ask me about the hole. We'll talk about that in a second. So there's that option. And then if I rip out again, I'm just going to go back a bit. You can also do this. So this is the other way you see people joining. I take my yarn, I go in to knit my stitch. I take my yarn that I was working with. I take the yarn that I'm changing to. I take both of them around to do a double stitch, so double knit stitch. The most important thing with doing this method is that next time you come all the way around, you knit the two of those together and you don't accidentally turn them into two different stitches. And then you can just, so some people will then knit on a few rows with both held together. I don't tend to, because I find that the colour, I prefer to chain straight to my colour and then hide them later by weaving in my ends. And then you just continue working in your new colour. And that is how you change colours. So really, really straightforward. So I have a double stitch or a single stitch. Now you're probably wondering, what am I going to do about this hole? So what I do about that hole is I'm going to take this yarn at the end when I've knit more rounds. I'm going to sew this in and join them up that way by knitting into the stitches. And then I'm also going to hide any, I'll cut this and be hiding that tail this way. So that kind of pulls them together really nicely then when you're finished. So my dears, that is casting on. So a slip knot, casting on and joining in the round and then joining in your first colour. The only difference then, and I'm just going to show you this on a regular sock. What you'll see is that in this decorative sock we have a decorative cuff. In a regular sock you're much more likely to see something like a rib. So this is a twisted rib, but it's a 1x1 rib, so a knit and a purl. You may have 2 stitches, and why you do that is because it gives it good stretch. And that's because you're going to have to bring that up over your foot. So that's going to be something that you see that's the difference between knitting a decorative sock like this and a regular sock that you're going to put onto your foot later on. I just wanted to say that. But other than that, you'll see that we work in a rib and then we change to a stocking stitch piece. You could change colour if you wanted after the rib as well. So they're kind of similar. So that is where we're going to finish tonight. I'm going to swap across to the main camera now, and then you can let me know if you have any questions, and then we will continue on again tomorrow. Hello again. So that's it. I know that that's a really basic start, but those are all of the things that you will be doing for both the decorative and a regular sock. Tomorrow night we're going to cover the Latvian braid and we're going to cover some colour work, but just to get you all started and settled in. So if you are working along on the plain sock, cast on and knit all of your garter stitch piece, this piece, and then move on to your leg. If you're going to do the fancier leg, I would cast on your stitches and follow the first part of the pattern that tells you to knit 4 rounds in stocking stitch and then stop, because then we're going to work on the Latvian braid, and we're also going to work on the kind of the speckled colour work as well tomorrow. So if you're starting your main sock and you're knitting along with the big one, I get all the way down as far as you can, because then we're going to do the heel on Wednesday, and I don't know about you, but there's a little bit of knitting in that, and then oh, I'm so glad, Annie. It's really soft, isn't it? It's really lovely. There is one thing actually we're going to talk about when we do the Latvian braid with this yarn. You have to do something slightly different when you're using different types of yarn for Latvian braid, but we will talk about that tomorrow as well. So if you are knitting along, I'd love to see how you get on tomorrow, and if you have any questions, let me know. And does anyone have any questions now? You can tell I love Christmas socks. These are from my Sockmas book, and that's where my Christmas sock journey, but it would be honestly it's quite tricky to knit those. Oh, very good. Yeah. No, if you are working along with me, I can imagine, yeah, it's better to watch and It's better to watch and then start knitting on. The splitting, yeah. So what I do is with the roving is to just be gentle with it. It's with any yarn actually is to avoid splitting it, which is why I've kind of have chosen the kind of slightly pointier bamboo needles because they hold them really well, and it makes you're not as quick, so you're less likely to split them with the roving. Plus, it kind of makes you go a little bit slower as well, which is nice. Let me see now. Yes. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely high. I was people wouldn't expect anyone to follow along kind of directly. We could be here a while. It'd be very exciting actually. Sometime I might do a knit along where we just sort of sit for 10 hours and do the sock all together. It would be very exciting. I do, Margaret, so I have this yarn at the moment I have it in the white, the red, the green and the hot pink. So I've loads of it. If you want individual balls of it or anything as well, if people want more, you don't want the kit or you don't want the sets that are there, just drop me an email, michelle@theloveliestjarncompany.co.uk, and I can put packs together in pretty much any colour you want. You might need more yarn. Yes, if you just want yarn in specific colors, just drop me an email, and I can arrange that for you as well. They're really fun. And there will be, by the end of the week, there will be another option to put another different leg on this as well. I didn't know how many people would be really excited about doing loads of different things with it, so I'm really that's really made me very happy. So if no one has any more questions though, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm delighted to be here. I know it's very early for Christmas, but you know what, I think we all really need plenty of early Christmas this year. Yes. Oh, you're having your needles are arriving on Wednesday. Don't worry, all of the videos will be here, and what I'll probably do is once they're all recorded, I'll probably put them onto YouTube so that you can manage the speed at which they play a little bit better as well, because I know that on Facebook Live they're not as manageable as on YouTube, so I'll probably put them up on YouTube as well so that you can kind of pause and speed up and everything if you want to watch me at 2+ speed, which is quick. I'll definitely put them on YouTube as well. I think it'll be easier for everybody. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I know that this is really basic, but I'm nice and slow. There's no rush. I think sometimes we rush at knitting and it's just gentle and nice. Thank you all. Have a lovely evening, and I will see you. Hopefully, if you are knitting your socks, do post in the group. I love seeing them as they emerge. And I will see you all tomorrow night for Latvian braids, which I think must be one of my favourite things in the entire world since I started doing them. So take care, everybody. Have a lovely evening. See you tomorrow.